This is Leisha Holmes and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast, and I am so excited to introduce to you today a lady that I got to know very well during 2021 because I had the absolute honour and pleasure of actually finding her a new role, but that's a total aside as to what we're going to talk about today. To our wonderful community, this is Katie McNicol, and she's also known, if you're over on Instagram, as This Sober Girl. Welcome to you today, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Leisha. I'm fine. Thank you for having me. It's an honour.
Well, it's an honour for me because you're an absolute pro when I watch your amazing TikTok. I mean, this woman is the TikTok queen on Instagram. For those who are not yet following you, which I'm presuming there's going to be a massive rush to Instagram to follow you now, but for those who aren't yet familiar with you and your brand, give us an intro as to what you do.
So my name on Instagram, as you've said, is @thissobergirl. I basically started blogging about sobriety when I was 6 months sober. So I stopped drinking when I was 24. And well, actually, I started the Instagram page on my day one, which is the 13th of November 2019. But really, I was anonymous on it, and I just hid behind, like, I had no pictures of myself on there or anything because I wasn't confident enough in my sobriety yet. So I was just sort of like watching everyone else. And then when I was 6 months sober, I sort of got the confidence to show my face on there and wanted to sort of share my story to help other younger people who wanted to stop drinking, to help inspire and motivate them. And then since then, I've been posting sort of like publicly for about 18 months now. And yeah, the page has just like grown, and it's just an amazing community of people. It's just my absolute passion, really.
Yeah, and that's really obvious. I mean, you've got over 15,000 followers as we record this at the start of 2022. And I think that's really interesting that you almost had it as a pseudonym at the start, because was it, I guess, accountability that you started sharing it on Instagram? Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So the first 6 months, it was more, I was just curious about how other people lived sober, because I had no sober friends. I didn't know anybody of my age or demographic who was completely sober. Or had the same sort of quote unquote problem as me. I just felt very lonely. So I just went on Instagram to sort of watch other people and get inspo. And then after the 6 months, I started to post my face for, like you say, accountability. And it really works because I'm over 2 years sober now.
That's amazing. So at that point where you had that kind of crossover from being, I guess, anonymous to this is me, this is actually Katie, where were you in your career within recruitment? Because obviously our audience is predominantly recruitment professionals all over the globe, and as they're listening to this now, they might be thinking, I'm keen to do the same. And I guess we want to keep this a broad audience attraction, but I think very specifically, if it resonates even with one person, we might have an impact on that person. So where were you in your career at this point when you were dabbling, I guess, with sobriety anonymously, but then wanting to make it more accountable?
So actually, if we rewind a bit, so I started working in recruitment in 2018, in I think it was May or June 2018, and that same summer that I started working in recruitment was the first sober stint I ever did. Right. Part of the reason of that was personal reasons, and sort of like to do with my drinking, but also because I thought I really want a clear head. I know, well, I've heard that recruitment is stressful, pressurized environment, target driven, and it was completely new to me. And I'd actually always said, I'm never going to work in recruitment. I'm just never going to work in recruitment. Like, you hear so many horror stories, don't you? I adore recruitment now, so it's just silly. But at the time, you know, this was like however many years ago, I was sort of, influenced to go into recruitment by my family, because they said to me, we think you'd be really good at sales, basically, so go and do that. So I thought, right, okay. So I did actually my first 3 months of recruitment sober. Wow. Thank God. Because if you're new in recruitment, obviously you know how overwhelming it is, and it's like information overload. So I look back now and I think I'm so grateful that I went in every Monday morning sharp as, knowing like I was, you know, I had great sleep, I was like on the ball, ready to learn, like, you're just like a sponge, aren't you? And you're exhausted, obviously, mentally.
Yeah.
So the weekend, you know, I just slept and rested and went to the gym. And actually, after that first 3 months of recruitment, once I sort of had got my head around it, I went back drinking. And then it's interesting because at the time you don't think there's a correlation, but there really was. I all of a sudden had really bad anxiety about work. And I would like get in the car and I'd be like, you know, when you get a really tight chest. And I've suffered with anxiety and depression in the past before, but specifically anxiety at that time was awful, actually. But when it just becomes your day-to-day life, you very much just accept the way that it is. Yeah. So I drank again for another 10 months. Surprisingly, still did very well in recruitment. So that was lucky. But then I actually, when I stopped again for my final day one, which like I said was the 13th of November 2019, I actually moved to Australia and worked in recruitment over there. So you'll know, Leisha, in early sobriety, your head is just like all over the place. So the only thing that I really was I was just trying to get through the sort of day, to be honest. And I did find, though, that work was like my kind of safe place. Yeah. Because you're busy and like in a pressurized environment, but because your head is clear enough to deal with those things, you thrive.
Yeah, you do.
And like I was like making friends and like going out for lunches with people, and you know, like and obviously this is on the other side of the world in Australia on my own in early sobriety. Like I say it now and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe you did that. But you know, you experience these things and you get through it. But I'm so grateful for that. Because especially things like, you know, I was an experienced recruiter, but I did a completely different market in a completely different country. You know, and it's like you've almost never done it before. You understand the process, but it's like completely brand new to you. So yeah, I think going sober at that time was an absolute lifesaver for me in recruitment terms.
So given that you were in a different country, totally isolated from your core people, because I know you're very close to your family and your family are adorable. Yeah. Your dad, I hope, has got his own page because he's a legend. But I think I find this really interesting, this anxiety topic relating directly to alcohol, because I had a very similar experience to you, but for over a 20-year period where my anxiety was constant about things that were well within my control. And I realise now I'm almost 5 years sober. I very rarely get anxiety now at all. I mean, of course I have stress levels.
Yeah, of course.
You can cope with the stress because you're more mindful of it, and the physical things that happen in your body when you've been drinking directly affect how you react to things, because everything in life is about how you react to something. So I find that really fascinating. So how was it during that period when you were so far away from your family and what you knew?
Well, this is what's so bizarre when I look back, because as well, when I was working in Australia, newly sober, away from my family and friends and stuff, then COVID came. Yeah. So then there was that stress on top of as well. And I actually had only worked over there for 4 weeks. Obviously, I'd got a 4-year visa. So I'd sold everything I owned at home, starting this new life. My sister lives in Australia, so I was going to be with her. Like, I went over there single. I was like, right, new start. And then 4 weeks later, COVID came and I had to get on the next plane home because the business that I worked for couldn't promise me job security, which is completely understandable. So I literally, within 24 hours of knowing that, my manager at the time, bless her, she walked me to the travel agent because I was like shaking just from the shock and stress of it all. And she like helped me book a flight home. I'd lived in a flat for 6 days and I lost thousands on the deposit. And then, like I say, I'd only lived in there for 6 days. And then before I knew it, I was sat back at home thinking, what on earth? Like, what just happened? And I didn't drink.
Oh my God.
And I think the only way I got through that, when I say it in like 10 seconds, I'm like, you're not describing it as very stressful, but believe me, I was Googling the symptoms of a nervous breakdown because I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I was so stressed. Never experienced stress like it. But the only way I got through that is because I wasn't drinking. I honestly do not know how I would have dealt with that situation if I was drinking, because I heard this amazing quote once, and I always think about it, especially when I was in my early sobriety, is drinking alcohol is like pouring petrol on our anxiety. Like, and it's so true. It's just like, it just sets it off into uncontrollable flames. Like, that's what it was like for me. It was crippling at times. So I think once you sort of wrap your head around that, you know, alcohol equals anxiety, it doesn't relax you. That's how it's marketed to us. It relaxes you for 20 minutes max. And then it's cortisol and adrenaline, and you're anxious. So as long as you remember that, then I think you very quickly realise that actually it's not a remedy, it's the cause, actually.
It really is. And I know that as we record this now, and you know, I'm mindful that I don't know how long your post will stay on for, but I know that you've sort of talked about that, about advertising specifically from alcohol manufacturers, that they make it look sexy and glamorous, and that it's going to make you feel amazing. Was it wonder? I think they used the word
wonder. Yeah.
And I was
wonder.
Do you know that your audience talk out loud to you, by the way, when you share a post like that? Because I was like, it makes you feel wonderfully fabulous for about 5 seconds, and then you feel terrible. So I think I do think, but it's interesting because I wanted to sort of put my experience as a very vocal sober recruiter out there, because certainly, and contextualize it within the pandemic, because so many people jumped on alcohol when lockdown 1 happened, particularly in the UK, because everything was shut. So what else was there to do? You know, it was, you know, you see people sharing pictures of prosecco in the garden, whatever, because it was sunny. Do you remember we had this heat wave?
Yeah.
But it then had a climatic shift in people where they thought, is this it then? Because it went on for so many months. And actually, you were either going down a very slippery slope to alcoholism, or I had people approaching me saying, I don't want to do this, and actually choosing the other extreme, which is, of course, sober life. So I find it really interesting that it did have a real sort of disparity between how people felt about alcohol, certainly during a shared anxiety period of the pandemic, because I don't think anybody's ever gone through what we went through in 2020. Yeah. And beyond, actually. So I think it's really interesting. So you know our audience is potentially, a lot of people listening are at that influential stage in their career, which, you know, early career, they might have joined the recruitment sector maybe even during the pandemic. And it's something that I've talked quite vocally about, that our industry seems to be wedded to alcohol, and has been very historically. I mean, I'm going back 20 odd years. That's how long I've been in recruitment for, where, you know, we seem to use it to celebrate. You know, we have lunch clubs, we have, you know, quarterly nights out, we have rewards of massive bottles of Prosecco. And I've always thought, you know, certainly the last few years, why is that? You know, why don't we reward in different ways with experiences? And I know you guys at $4 into all your axe throwing, and you're pretty good at stuff that isn't centered around just drinking. You know, that there's a lot of foodies in there, and I think that's much more enjoyable to go out and have a great meal than just a trolley. So if we've got a catchment of people that are listening who are sat there thinking, I don't want to get pissed, I don't want to go on it, or I'm going on this lunch club, I'm really excited, but they're going to be pouring Prosecco. What do I do? What would your advice be to those people specifically?
I always say that honesty is the best policy, because in the 4 years, so when I first was sober curious, I was 20 years old, and for 4 years I tried to get sober, and it just wouldn't stick. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stick it out because I wasn't being honest. I wasn't being honest with myself, most importantly, but I also wasn't being honest with the people around me. Like, it was always like a bit of a joke, that in the end was incredibly not funny, and dangerous, actually. And I think that if you work for a business and you feel like, even if there's one person in that business that you feel like you can have an honest, open and supportive conversation, because it is a vulnerable thing to talk about, you know, especially if it's affecting you in other ways, like your mental health and things like that, it bleeds into other areas of your life, which obviously is usually what causes people to want to stop. Because if it was just about the alcohol and having a little bit of a headache in the morning, then people just brush it off. But it's not that. It's so much more complex than that. So if you have someone that you can talk to, please talk to them. And it doesn't have to be a big, heavy conversation. You know, like when I first started at Forward Roll, obviously I was already 2 years sober, so I was very comfortable and confident in my sobriety. So when I told Brian, oh yeah, I just don't drink, it just sort of, it's who I am now. So it's like, take it or leave it. I don't drink. I'm not really bothered what people think. But obviously when you are in early sobriety, like when I moved to Australia, I told my manager straight away. And I was honestly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I was maybe like 6 weeks sober at the time. And she was you will be surprised how supportive and how like amazed people are. People will not think that you're weird, or all the things that you're thinking in your head do not come to fruition. People are impressed. People want to know how. People you're like a little like celebrity. Like people are like, oh wow, like tell me your secrets. And it's like, yeah, you just don't drink alcohol. Like literally, that's it. It's literally that simple. But if you're able to have an open conversation with someone who will be your little ally, then that's really, really important. Like at Forward Roll, they've been absolutely amazing, because I think the biggest thing when you start drinking, you are worried that you're going to be an outcast, that you're going to be different to everybody else. You're not going to fit in. You're going to be lonely. You're going to be the weird one in the corner, the boring one. Yeah. But it's just not true. Alcohol, Alicia, I know you're the same because we've spoken about this before, but alcohol dulled my personality. Yeah. Like alcohol made me boring. And so when you go into sobriety, you're set free. But like at Forward Roll, they've been so accommodating, with like alcohol-free options and going out for nice dinners, and just nobody really making a big deal out of it. And I think that's but I think to get sober right now is different to it was 30 years ago. Now it's getting there. We're really getting there. We're at the start of this like sober revolution where young people, you can get sober. It's like going vegan or going vegetarian. Nobody thinks you're weird for doing that. People are just like, oh cool, lifestyle choice, that's just what you do. Great, let's move on. It's not a big deal.
You're not a pariah.
Yeah.
And I think
no, not at all.
5 years ago, when I went sober 5 years ago, which was after a period of moderation, I moderated for 10 months, which was basically social pressure. It was definitely peer pressure. It wasn't I wanted to continue to drink.
Yeah.
It was, I realised now it probably would have been a massive shock to my system as well if I'd just suddenly gone cold turkey.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I think that a large part of feeling like you're a social pariah actually comes from yourself, because you think you go
massively
differently, and actually the reality is most people don't care.
Honestly, the best piece of advice I ever got from my dad was he literally said, because I said to him, oh my god, like you do, oh my god, what are they going to say, and what are they going to do, and what if they think this, and what if they say that? And he went, do you really think that people care about you as much as you care about you? Nobody cares. Like, it's your ego. Nobody cares. And I was just like, ouch. But okay. And it really changed my perspective, but it's true. And it's the same if you're in a working environment. Obviously I'm very fortunate with Forward Roll that we do have a lot of foodies, as well, people that want to do activities, people that aren't big drinkers, people that don't drink at all, like myself. So I'm very fortunate. But if you do work in a business that is literally saturated with alcohol, it's very easy for me to say, oh, just have a conversation with someone. But if you don't feel like you've got that, like my best advice would actually be to just use all the tools that you would in daily life. It's not different at work as it is in a social group of friends. It's not different at all. So just make sure that you have an escape route. Make sure that you can drive home, or just tell them you've got plans the next day, you don't want to be hungover, you're on medication, you're training for a marathon. Like, there's so many reasons why people don't drink. You could just say you're allergic to it, or you're doing a detox. The great thing is as well, we're in this massive movement at the moment of health and well-being. If you said to somebody, I'm just doing a detox, they're like, all right, cool, good for you. There's no more questions asked. So
I would have that scenario though. If it was a company if your employer is saturated in alcohol and you have chosen this, I would suggest actually, and this isn't me with the rec to rec hat, and this is me as a human being, that there isn't a values match there, and you might want to think about that long term, because if all they want,
that is so true,
then they're not going to be hang around with anyway. So that's just as a little aside. I'm very mindful that, and I do agree with you, I think that there has been a real shift since COVID began, that we're more aware of our well-being, our mental health, and overall sort of health of ourselves, both physically and mentally, and how it all ties together. And it's talked about, and thank God for things like mental health and recruitment. Shout out to Rhonda and to people like Rhonda who are making sure that we're taking ourselves more seriously, because if you are in recruitment for the long term, you do have to put your health and well-being at the forefront of that. And I think for me, one of the pinnacles is about managing out how much alcohol you consume, because there's no question that it does impact your performance. There's no question about it. Athletes don't, train for the Olympics and get smashed the night before. And that, to me, to arrive with your best performance every day, you need to be sharp, you need to be creative, you need to be able to remember things and be able to think intuitively and creatively. And the best way to do that is to have a clear head. So, but there will be plenty of people listening who maybe don't want to give it up from a social point of view. So they want to moderate. So I want to be, we're not being evangelical, either of us. This is just, you and I were connected because I'm a Rex you came recommended, but actually we've connected very much on a sober life sort of basis. Sobriety is the way of life for me. So what would, for those who are maybe looking to decrease the amount of alcohol they consume or just live a more balanced life, have you got some amazing top tips for us, which I realise will be generic?
Yes, yeah, no, of course, because I think it is important to talk about this, actually, because obviously I am a sober person, you are a sober person, we've made this decision for ourselves, but everybody's journey is different. Like, I started moderating, I realised that didn't work for me. I had to try it to figure out whether it did work for me or not. And so I talk about this on my Instagram as well, because I don't want it to be just people that are just completely teetotal. But if you're just sick of being hungover, or like you want to drive home, then that's absolutely fine as well. So I'm glad that you've brought this up. I think the advice for people who want to moderate, it sounds so silly, but like literally as simple as don't order doubles, order singles, don't order a large glass of wine, order a small with loads of ice and soda. Like, change your drinks, dilute your drinks. You don't have to drink hard spirits or, anything like that. Or even, like cocktails and things like that. Each cocktail you have, swap it out for a mocktail. Like, personally, I tried that. It didn't work for me. I have a brain that once I drink a certain amount, I can't stop thinking about the next drink. So for me, moderation was just stressful because I was just constantly thinking, I was just like, oh my God, my head's going to fall off. For me, it's all or nothing. But those tips help if you want to drink, or alcohol-free options are unbelievable. Yeah. If you don't want to drink alcohol at all because you're driving or whatever, the alcohol-free options, even in only my 2 years of sobriety, like I'm still a baby in my sobriety, they are amazing. Like, they are so amazing. Sometimes I have to double check that it's not alcohol. And then sometimes I think I get I get paranoid. Yeah, literally, I'm like, wait, is that does that really say 0%, or does that say 12%? Because that can't be real. So yeah, alcohol-free options are absolutely great, and you can literally get them from anywhere now. Any big supermarket, they usually have a large sort of area next to the alcohol-free options. You can go online, and there's loads of like smaller brands as well online or on Instagram that are really creative and delicious. Some really innovative stuff coming up in that sector, which is great.
But you do share quite a few. I think you've got collaborations that happen. I do watch those and think they're really cool. I mean, I personally didn't go down the alcohol-free drink route. And even 5 years ago, like you say, it's only really been the last 2 years. It just wasn't an option for me. But I think your advice on sort of, going from double to single, swapping your large glass of wine for a small, or even having a soft drink, alcoholic drink and rotating it, that could definitely work. Those are just really simple tips that actually anyone could do. And I think it's more acceptable now to do that and to order alcohol free. I think I've noticed it in my local supermarkets in good old Ramsbottom. So they have got a whole section of non-alcoholic drinks, which has only just happened in the last couple of months. And I'm like a whole section.
Yeah, I know. It's actually amazing. It is so amazing. Yeah. And also on that, sort of ordering singles, not doubles and things like that, those are really sort of sneaky things you can do if you don't want to openly announce, hello everyone, I'm moderating my drinking. You don't have to openly say that to your friends and family if you don't feel comfortable to yet. If you just want to experiment yourself and see how you feel, they're just really like low-key ways that you can do that. So yeah, I hope that they help.
So you are you have lots of events, you do an awful lot with yoga, and you're an amazing community. So have you got anything, I know you can't necessarily tell us specifically things, but is there anything we need to watch out for during 2022 with this Sober Girl?
Yes, so basically there's talks of, well, there's definitely going to be more events, definitely. Right. I started doing events last year after COVID. Obviously we couldn't do sort of in-person events, which was a shame. So last year I did a couple of events, this Sober Yoga, which is like a yoga session, coffee and cake, and everyone was chatting. It was so lovely. And then I did a Christmas party, which was amazing as well. So this year we're going to do, a couple more things like that. Probably do a summer party, this Sober Yoga. And then actually I may be starting a podcast, but that's just a May. That's just a May. I'm not sure. It's just in talks with
well, definitely.
Yes, you have heard it here first, Lucia. There's a little exclusive for you.
And if ever you want a guest who happens to run around,
of course,
Sober as well, we'd be delighted to come on. You have been, as I knew you would be, you have been honest, you've been funny, you've been pragmatic, and most of all, you've just been very real about your experience. You've shared some real vulnerability with us, Katie, and I really appreciate that, as I'm sure our audience will. And what I like as well is that you don't preach. You know, this is just your experience, and clearly over 15,000 people are inspired by you. So we will make sure that everyone has the access to @this Sober Girl. If you're over on Instagram, make sure you're following Katie here on LinkedIn as well. And thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, press the wrong thing. Hang on.